compound meter and why I sometimes wait to teach the I Can Read Music rhythm section 47 to 50 until a little bit later. Compound meter is always a tricky topic. Compound meter refers to any meter that has a 6, 9, or 12 on the top. So if you look at the top number here, in this case this is 6, 8, right? The number on the bottom could be any number of things. It could be an 8, a 4, or a 16, or something the like, even a 2 sometimes, but the top number is what we're looking at. So any number on the top that is divisible by 3 but not including 3. Okay, that's a really tricky definition, but that is the correct definition. So compound meter basically means that we have a time signature in which we are taking the beats in a measure and grouping them. That's basically what it is. And in this case, the grouping is going to be by 3s. So if you're a brave one who wants to try this section out, go right ahead. If you feel that in the middle of my explaining things are getting a little bit too complicated, then I highly recommend you don't watch this video and just wait for a later date. Who knows, it could be just next week when you're ready to, learn these rhythms here in this section. But certain things that we took for granted, that we thought were norms, are now going to be kind of shaken up. And so it kind of reveals if we have made certain assumptions in the past, that suddenly these assumptions don't hold true anymore. So it's kind of a learning experience. Actually, it could expose some really important things. However, it could make things a bit shakier as well. So please feel free to wait and watch this video at a later date if you need. Okay, so going back to 47, rhythm 47. Basically, up until now, I have not put too much emphasis on the time signature here. In fact, many times my students, they actually don't notice it, or maybe they notice it and they ask me what it is. I usually just give them a very quick and general answer, and I tell them that I will talk about it more later. Usually this is in the case when I am teaching a brand new students or a really young student. In this case, I try to put off until later certain conversations that we may need to have. If, like I've said in the past, the student has more experience, or I find that they have a quick grasp of the things that I've been teaching them up to now, then I might venture forth and talk about this and explain it and teach it to them. So it really depends on the student. So right now we have to kind of address the time signature a little bit more. So in this case, it is 6, 8. So if you look at the top line here, we see many eighth notes kind of beamed together, and then we see some dotted quarter notes. And what you're going to see is that now we're going to be looking for eighth notes, whereas before, I guess the quarter note or the 1 beat pulse, or the word that we call blue, that was sort of the norm. That was the easy and expected pulse. Whereas now we have to kind of take those glasses off and put on kind of different spectrum, maybe rose tinted glasses, and we have to start looking for eighth notes. And so we're going to be looking for 6 eighth notes per measure. So basically what the time signature means is that the top number is giving us how many of what we're looking for. The bottom number is telling us what we're looking for. So I always say top number is how many and the bottom number is what. Okay, it's basically an inventory. So one of the main reasons, when I was teaching music theory, music literacy, ear training, those types of subjects at the university in the past, I ran across even college students who have a hard time grasping this concept. Many of them are just fine with it, but I find that's because maybe something had been explained slightly incorrectly, or maybe the full picture wasn't given to the student, and so they had made some assumptions, and now it's kind of difficult to get past that mental block. So in this case, I usually try to stay away from talking about beats and pulses and things. I may mention a pulse once in a while later on, but right now I simply just try to explain that a time signature is sort of an inventory. Okay, so whether it's a 3/4 time signature, that would be 3, and then the bottom number represents quarter notes, so there are 3 quarter notes per measure. So every time we see a measure line and we see those boxes in the music divided up into the boxes, then we are looking for the same number of items or certain durations within each measure. Okay, so in the case of 6/8, right, it's tricky to start talking about beats, because that's one of the few situations where talking about beats too early starts to confuse the matter. So we're just going to stick with the concept of inventory, and we're going to be looking for 6/8 notes in every single measure. So if we have a dotted quarter note, well, a dotted quarter note, we used to think of it as a beat and a half, right? I used to say there are 3 halves in a dotted quarter note, and or 3/8 notes in every dotted quarter note. So now we're looking for the 3/8 notes. So in this second measure here, we have 2 dotted quarter notes. So if we count, there were 3/8 notes here, 3/8 notes there. 3 plus 3 equals 6. So no matter how we kind of total up everything, every single measure we get to, we're going to get the number 6, because there are 6/8 notes per measure. Right? I can pick any measure I like, maybe this one. See, there's 1, 2, 3, 3/8 notes, and then there's a dotted quarter note, that's 3/8 notes, so 3 plus 3 equals 6. Okay? Now, the reason why this is very challenging is actually, I'd say, boils down to 2 main reasons. The first reason is we've been kind of going through this whole book thinking that the quarter note was the norm, right? And one beat or one pulse is always the quarter note. Well, that's not always true. So you will see in the second volume of this book that we actually talk about cut time, right? When we're counting half notes, we talk about meters where we're counting eighth notes. So we do become introduced to many different types of pulses and different types of durations we're looking for. So later on we will have that opportunity. So we need to understand that this whole world doesn't revolve around quarter notes, although you might think so, because it's called, the 4/4 time signature is called common time for a reason. It is the most common, and so we're going to be kind of living in the world of quarter notes. However, it's not the whole world. We're going to have pockets of, instances where we need to be looking for half notes. We're going to be needing to look for eighth notes, 16th notes. If any of you have ever played Stravinsky, you'll know that we have to count all sorts of notes. So it gets really dicey, very, very tricky. Lots of different time signatures, and we have to keep flipping in our minds. Are we counting quarters? Are we counting eighths? Are we counting 16th notes? And so really advanced music will have these aspects to it. So going back to this, it gets tricky because suddenly our eyes have to look for something else. Our brain has to perceive the norm as something else, number one. Okay, number two, the second reason why I think this is very challenging is because what happens is when we begin to have too many notes or things that we're looking for, I guess you could insert the word beats or pulses in every measure, it becomes very busy. So if I were to actually count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, every single measure, I'm counting 6 all the time, over and over and over. That's a lot of counting. Imagine a time signature of 12/8. If we counted to 12 every single measure, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. I've only counted 2 measures and I'm already exhausted. So this is not really, it's very cumbersome. It's not really, practical. And so the main reason why, we can't really count every single eighth note in real life is that it just goes by kind of too quickly and there's too much counting. Okay, generally if we have a 6/8 meter, a 9/8, a 12/8, the eighth notes are not super slow, generally speaking. So what happens psychologically in the brain is when we have many beats and they become faster. So I'll show you. Here's 6 beats, right? And you can kind of keep track of each one, right? But if I go faster, you can still kind of keep track. If I go faster, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It starts to become a lot, actually. And so if I go even faster, what our brain does, this is just a natural psychological response, is that we begin to group it. So if you've ever been to a concert and you suddenly hear music somewhere and then you start kind of, dancing or beating your foot to it or something, or moving to it, generally we're not going to move 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2. So generally we're not going to feel every single eighth note. We are going to feel every so many notes, okay? And we naturally group it in the way that is actually correct. So when we hear music, we might go like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we feel every 3 eighth notes. And that's just because the music gives many indications that that is the correct grouping. That's a long discussion for another day. It's really fascinating, actually, but that's just the way it goes. So eventually these meters that have large numbers on the tops, especially when they're grouped by 3s, that's why we we categorize them as compound meter, because we're going to be grouping them, and in these cases it's going to be every 3. A typical example of a compound meter is the melody Greensleeves. The rhythm goes dun da dun dun dun, 1, 2, 1, 2, and so it's going to be grouped into actually 2 pulses or 2 beats. But if we actually look at the written music, we should be looking for 6 eighth notes per measure. Now, what I usually do is when my student is learning a piece, I start them out by counting every single eighth note. Otherwise, certain rhythms are so intricate, it's difficult to understand it until you really break it down into their subdivisions. And then once they've kind of done it for a while, I guess a few weeks, depending on the student, 2 weeks to 6 weeks or whatnot, once they really have figured out the correct rhythm and they have been playing it for a while, then I ask them to kind of speed it up and just kind of feel it more instinctually. And so at that point, let's say they're getting ready for a concert and they're about to play their concert. If they're still counting like 6 eighth notes per measure, the music is really not going to come to life. It's not going to have the right style, the right feel, the right flow. And so there has to be this time, when it sort of switches over. It's part of the learning process. And as you polish a piece and you get ready for a performance, you have to kind of let go of those beats, and then you do start grouping the large groups and you feel the large pulses. So that is basically the topic in a nutshell, as best as I can, explain for somebody who's kind of new to this topic, I could keep the discussion going and actually turn it into a very advanced topic and a very advanced discussion. But for now, I hope that makes sense. And if it doesn't quite, then I would say keep learning all of the rhythms that we've done up to date. Do some more study on whatever you happen to be learning right now, and then come back to it. And maybe there might be a day where you have to actually learn a piece of music that has 6/8 time signature or 9/8. Come back and watch this video again. I think it's going to make a bit more sense. So just to wrap up, for example, I showed you 47. Now I'll show you the final page of the rhythm. And it's a combination of eighth notes, dotted quarter notes, and a single eighth note, the one with the flag, and then the quarter notes. So what we want to do is really figure out how many eighth notes go in each. So these are obviously one each. These are 3 each, right? And then this is going to be 1/8 note. A quarter note gets 2/8 notes now. So do you see how it's tricky to really flip the brain and go into the 8th note mode? Because whereas we saw that and we think automatically 1, and now we see that and we have to think 2, okay? And this one we're thinking 3. So you could just say the word ta all the way through, or you could say the number of 8th notes that go in. I will show you both ways, right? Line 1. Ready? And ta, ta, ta. Ta, 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 ta. I think line 3 is a good one. Let's try this. We have a dotted half note over here. Whereas this, when we saw that, we instantly thought 3E, didn't we? But now we have to think 6/8 notes. Okay, so we're thinking 6 here. So we're going to go line 3, okay? And this time I'm going to say the number that corresponds to it. So this is a 2, that's a 1, this is a 3. I'm just going to count it all out, okay? Ready? And 1, 2, 1, 1, 2, 3. 1, 1, 2. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 1, 1, 1, 1. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Hope that makes sense. And if you understood up to now, then I would highly recommend you practice one of these 2 methods, or try both out actually, and see which one works for you. And that way you can become acclimated with this 6/8 time signature. And so anytime in the future you see an 8 on the bottom, that's what you're looking for. You're looking for that many 8th notes, okay? So the 8 on the bottom, we're looking for 8th notes. And so especially school music, once in a while school music will have compound time signature, and so you may need to kind of prepare yourself, do some pre-study. So it's a good opportunity to just wet your feet and try it out.